Good day, this is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you for Reason to Resist from Kalamata, Greece on October 8th, 2025. Yesterday was the second anniversary of the attacks launched on Israel by Palestinian militants on October 7th, 2023. So we have now entered the third year, yes, the third year of Israel's Western-backed live-streamed genocide in occupied Palestine. Needless to say, this is a stain on the reputations of Western governments that no one will ever be able to wash off. No amount of propaganda can bury the horrible truth we have all learned during these past 2 years, and that truth is that we in the West are ruled by monsters. Today, I'm going to examine events that have occurred within the past 48 hours that relate to the Palestinian cause. I'll focus on the status of the negotiations between the Palestinian resistance and the genocidal Israeli entity. And before I get into it, I'd like to remind you to like and share this video if you find it informative, and to become a subscriber of Reason to Resist if you're not already one. After creating this program in the summer of 2024, we're now at nearly 108,000 subscribers, and our goal is to reach 150,000 by the end of the year. So please subscribe if you're not already a subscriber. Now, let's get into it. Yesterday, October 7th, genocidal Western leaders condemned what they described as the terrorism of Palestinians while saying nothing about the terrorism of Israel. One such genocidal leader was Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, whom I refer to affectionately as Prime Minister Goldman Sachs. And here you can see a post that he issued on X yesterday, in which he said, Israel has, 2 years ago, young Israeli music lovers gathered at a peaceful festival when the terrorist organization Hamas launched the deadliest attack on the Jewish people since the Holocaust. On this day and every day, we stand with the victims, their families, and so forth. And you'll see that I quoted his post and reposted it with this comment: Israel has murdered vastly more civilians than were killed in Israel on October 7th, yet Prime Minister Goldman Sachs has never described Israel's monstrous crimes as terrorism. That's because Mark J. Carney attaches no value to Palestinian life. I think that that's an entirely fair inference from the totality of his commentary and actions or inactions relating to the genocide in Gaza. Recently, I had occasion to compare the number of child casualties in the Gaza Strip to those that Israel is said to have sustained by the Israeli government on October 7th. According to the Israelis, 38 children were killed in Israel on October 7th. None of them, by the way, were burned alive. None of them were beheaded, contrary to claims of Israeli propagandists. But the number we are told is 38. According to the most conservative estimates of the children who have been killed thus far in the Gaza Strip during the past 2 years of genocide, Israel has murdered about 526 children in Gaza for every child who was killed, according to Israel, on October 7, 2023 by Palestinian militants. If you are not prepared in these circumstances to describe Israel's actions as terrorism, and of course, that one statistic is but one brick in the wall of evidence that Israel is engaging in terrorist acts. But if that's not enough to prompt you to say that Israel is engaged in terrorism, then the only rational inference we can draw is that you are a liar, or that you attach essentially no value to the lives of Palestinian civilians. And by the way, those two possibilities are not mutually exclusive. And I think they, in fact, apply to both Mark Carney and to every leader of every major Western country, none of whom, even now, even after all the depravity we have witnessed Israel perpetrate on the Palestinian people, none of them is prepared to accuse Israel of terrorism. Now, not only did we get the standard denunciations of Palestinian militants from genocide apologists without any accompanying denunciation of the vastly worse violence of Israel's terrorist military. But we also saw, as was entirely predictable, demands from genocide apologists that there be no protests yesterday on October 7th against Israel's ongoing genocide. One such genocide apologist in Canada is a person by the name of Robin Urbach. And Urbach is a columnist for the Canadian newspaper, the Globe and Mail, which is essentially Canada's newspaper of record. And she has, as you can imagine, based on this post I'm showing you here, a long and shameless record of disseminating the lies of the genocidal Israeli entity. As you can see, she posted on X yesterday that it was a, quote, failure and embarrassment for students at Concordia University in Montreal to protest against Israel's ongoing genocide on October 7th. And you can see on the screen my response to her post. I asked, are you suggesting that opposition to Israel's genocide is a failure and embarrassment? Have you no shame? Needless to say, Ms. Urbach did not respond to my question. So we're basically being told that Israeli lives are so precious in relation to those subhuman Palestinians that even though far more Palestinians have been killed in the past 2 years than were killed or persons killed in Israel on October 7th, and even though multiple human rights organizations around the world, including Israeli ones, have concluded that Israel is currently, right now, as I speak, committing genocide in the Gaza Strip, Ms. Urbach and people like her expect us to stop demanding an end to this genocide on October 7th. No, we're not going to stop on any day. We are going to be relentless until this horror is brought to an end, Ms. Urbach. Now, in more recent news, within the past 24 hours, the second wave of the global Sumud flotilla was intercepted by vessels of Israel's genocidal navy in international waters, approximately 120 nautical miles from the shores of Gaza. And I'd like to show you a press release that I received this morning from the organizers of the Freedom Flotilla Coalition. You'll see it's dated October 8th, and they start with the announcement that the 1,000 Madeleines to Gaza mission confirm that 3 boats, the Gaza Sunbirds, Ala al-Najjar, and Anas al-Sharif, that, by the way, is the name of an Al Jazeera journalist of Palestinian origin in Gaza who was openly and brazenly murdered along with other Palestinian journalists by Israel a few weeks ago at the entrance to a hospital. The flotilla announces that these boats have been attacked and illegally intercepted by the Israeli military at 4:34 this morning, local time, 120 nautical miles or 220 kilometers from Gaza. So that's well into international waters and nowhere near the territorial waters of the Gaza Strip, which, by the way, Israel has absolutely no right to control. And in fact, the ICJ last year expressed the opinion in an advisory ruling that Israel's occupation of the Gaza Strip is illegal and that it must bring it to an end as quickly as possible. So it wouldn't even have the right to intercept these humanitarian vessels in the waters of Gaza, let alone in international waters. And the Flotilla Coalition goes on to say sources so far indicate that the unarmed crew aboard, including doctors, journalists, and elected officials, have been abducted. So there's not only an illegal boarding and seizure of the vessels, but the passengers, humanitarian persons, have been kidnapped and are being taken against their will back to the territory of the genocidal entity. And the Israeli thieves have also stolen vital aid worth over $110,000 US in medicines, respiratory equipment, and nutritional supplies that were destined for Gazans starving hospitals for the time being, or at least at the time this press release was issued. The whereabouts of the kidnapped humanitarians were unknown. And then the statement goes on to say quite correctly, Israel has no legal authority to detain international volunteers aboard these ships. And this seizure blatantly violates international law and defies the ICJ's binding orders requiring unimpeded humanitarian access to Gaza. Now, Again, it is instructive to see how how Western governments have responded to this latest instance of Israeli criminality. Israel is yet again engaging in acts of piracy on the high seas because Western governments have given it the green light to do so, and have been giving it the green light for some 15 years, ever since Israel murdered humanitarian activists on the Mavi Marmara on its way to the Gaza Strip. And just to show you how pathetic the Western government reaction has been, here is a post from Canadian Foreign Minister Anita Anand, a former law professor at my alma mater, the University of Toronto School of Law. Miss Anand, upon learning that Canadian citizens had been kidnapped and incarcerated with no lawful justification in international waters, she says, off the coast of Israel. What a liar this person is. Anyways, I'll come back to that. She says all three of the Canadians were offered consular services by GAC Corporate, and all three are in the process of being released. That's it. That's the sum total of her commentary on the kidnapping of these Canadian citizens. So first of all, they weren't off the coast of Israel. They were off the coast of Gaza Strip. And the Gaza Strip, as Anand undoubtedly knows, is occupied Palestinian territory. It does not belong to Israel. So she's just flat out lying. She can't claim ignorance because she's a professor of law. She was for many years before she was rewarded for her failures in life and ascended to the head of the Foreign Ministry of Canada. And there's not a word, not a single word of criticism anywhere here relating to the kidnapping of Canadian citizens in international waters who were trying to deliver humanitarian aid to, over 1 million Palestinian civilians who are being starved to death by the Western-backed genocidal Israeli entity. This is what passes for leadership in the West nowadays, my friends. And just to show you how outrageous Anand's commentary is, let's compare it to Canada's response to Ansar Allah's attacks on commercial ships in the Red Sea. Now, let's focus on the fact here that in the case of the flotilla, we're dealing with humanitarian vessels. There's no money making going on here. There's no profit motive. In fact, people are donating money, sacrificing their hard-earned money to fund these humanitarian vessels. And the people who are upon them, both crew and passengers, are volunteers. They're not being compensated anything to put their lives at risk. So these are purely humanitarian, not-for-profit missions, whereas the commercial vessels that Ansar Allah has attacked and or seized in the Red Sea, these are owned by massive multinational corporations that are making money by serving the genocidal Israeli entity at a time that it is committing genocide before the eyes of the world. So in January of last year, around the time that the solidarity blockade instituted by Ansar Allah in the Red Sea began, the Canadian government put out a statement along with a bunch of other depraved lunatics from countries like Australia and Bahrain and Croatia, Denmark, Germany, of course, Hungary, Italy, and on, all of them essentially vassals of Washington. And they said that in response to continued illegal and reckless Houthi attacks against vessels transiting the Red Sea and surrounding waterways, the armed forces of the United States and the United Kingdom, with support from Australia, Bahrain, Canada, and the Netherlands, conducted additional strikes against 8 targets in Houthi-controlled areas of Yemen. Yes, they started murdering civilians in Yemen because the Yemenis, after themselves suffering what could fairly be described as a Western-backed genocide at the hands of a Saudi-led coalition since 2015, they were doing what no Western government is prepared to do, and that is to institute military action to try to help the people being subjected to genocide in occupied Palestine. And for this, the Canadian government here is boasting about the fact that it supported the criminal Trump regime in attacking the devastated country of Yemen for its humanitarian gesture of solidarity with the Palestinian people. And then they go on and they say, quote, the 30 plus attacks that the Houthis have launched on commercial and naval vessels since mid-November constitute a threat to all countries, not just Israel, that rely on international maritime shipping. We condemn these attacks and demand an end to them. Well, again, a lie, a flagrant lie, because as Ansarullah has made clear from the outset, all that the international community had to do to bring these attacks to an end was to stop the genocide in Gaza. That's it. And then the threat to shipping would be taken away. And furthermore, they weren't attacking just any ships. They were targeting ships that were serving Israel, that were owned by Israeli corporations. And so the vast majority of ships that were passing through the Red Sea were not being subjected to attack for that reason. Nonetheless, these governments, including the Canadian government, didn't hesitate to express their righteous indignation that for-profit massive corporations were being obstructed in their use of the Red Sea to a limited degree. But when Israel in international waters using violence seizes humanitarian vessels and kidnaps their passengers, all that Anita Anand can say is, we're providing consular services to the 3 Canadians. Really, I marvel to this day that Anita Anand actually was deemed fit not only to be a member of the bar, but to be a professor at the University of Toronto Law School. Let us hope that the University of Toronto has learned its lesson, and once her political career is mercifully brought to an end, that it doesn't welcome her back to the faculty. Now, let's move to the negotiations between Hamas and the genocidal Israeli entity now going on in Egypt. Hamas just reported that the first round of negotiations were completed successfully. And here you can see a statement posted within the past 24 hours on the Resistance News Network Telegram channel. It reads, discussions between mediators and Hamas concluded in Sharm el Sheikh, Egypt, moments ago. Sources indicated the meeting was positive and established a roadmap for the current negotiation round. The Resistance's delegation confirmed that continued bombing in Gaza challenges the release of captives. The delegation included Khalil al-Haya and Zahir Jabarin, who survived the assassination attempt in Doha. So they've managed not only to survive that attempt, and of course, Khalil al-Haya lost his son in that murderous and criminal attack by the Israeli entity. But they've managed to make their way to Egypt. I suspect that one of the reasons why, if not the main or exclusive reason that these negotiations are happening in Egypt and not Qatar, is because the Palestinians, quite rightly, do not trust the Qataris to protect them, but they think they have a better chance of surviving the perfidious and treacherous Israeli assassination attempts in Egypt, which has a much larger army than Qatar does. In any case, what are the murderous Israelis saying about the negotiations? The office of the war criminal Netanyahu has also issued a somewhat positive statement. According to the Times of Israel, in a report published yesterday, quote, the negotiations in Sharm el Sheikh for a Gaza ceasefire hostage deal based on U.S. President Donald Trump's proposal have made progress, the Prime Minister's office said Tuesday, as Egypt's top diplomat said that an American delegation led by White House Special Envoy Steve Witkoff will soon join the negotiations. An official from the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office told the Times of Israel that there was, quote, optimism but very cautious, close quote, while warning that, quote, Hamas can add obstacles at any moment and leave, close quote. The truth, of course, is that Israel has done everything imaginable to sabotage every peace proposal that has been put on the table. And let us be very clear here that the things that Hamas is demanding, the additional or amended provisions it evidently wants to be put into this agreement based on statements made before its negotiators assembled in Sharm el Sheikh. These things are not concessions. If they were to be granted to the Palestinian resistance, they're not concessions. Things like, withdrawing your troops from the Gaza Strip, releasing the thousands of Palestinian civilians you hold with no lawful justification in your dungeons and in conditions amounting to torture, allowing sufficient humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip to sustain the population. These things are simply requirements of fundamental principles of international law. So complying with these demands of Hamas would not be concessions. And the idea that these things constitute, quote, obstacles to peace being thrown up by Hamas is laughable. It's absolutely laughable, but nonetheless given credence by the corrupt and depraved corporate media in the West. Now, both sides, I think it's fair to say, are being tight-lipped about the substance of the discussions, but Hamas was obliged to issue a statement in response to reports that it had agreed to disarm under international supervision. And here you will see a report published today by the People's Dispatch, a fine media outlet that reports extensively on anti-imperialism and the crimes of the West. And you'll see here the headline, Hamas leaders' Palestinian resistance remains firm in refusal to disarm. And they quote a statement, the People's Dispatch, from an umbrella group of Palestinian resistance groups. So the statement's not just on behalf of Hamas, it's on behalf of many Palestinian resistance groups whose position is aligned with that of Hamas on this issue. Quote, no one has the right or is permitted to relinquish the weapon of the Palestinian people, close quote. No one. So they're saying that not even we, the leaders of these resistance groups, have the right to do that. That, I would suggest to you, is about as definitive a rejection of the demand to disarm as one can possibly imagine. And there's more that was said by the resistance in regard to these fraudulent reports. Hamas issued a statement saying that actually senior Hamas member Mahmoud Mardawi stated, we categorically deny the fabricated allegations published by several media outlets about the course of the ceasefire negotiations and Hamas's position on handing over weapons, close quote. He called these reports, quote, baseless and aimed to distort Hamas's stance and mislead public opinion, close quote. Mardawi called on media outlets to verify information and rely on credible sources, urging journalists not to fall for what he called rumors or unverified claims. I imagine that to the extent that request was directed at the intellectual prostitutes who work in the corporate media, it will fall on deaf ears. Now, as I've said repeatedly, my friends, under international law, Palestinians have the right to engage in armed resistance against the occupier. And so, if in the end the Israelis and the Americans accede to the insistence of Palestinian resistance groups that they remain armed, they wouldn't be making a concession. They'd simply be agreeing to respect Palestinians' basic rights under international law. Quite apart from the law, it is morally outrageous to demand that people who are being subjected to a genocide give up their light weapons while those who are perpetrating that genocide remain armed to the teeth. I cannot condemn strongly enough people who are issuing that demand to the Palestinian resistance without first ensuring that the genocidal Israeli entity has been completely and utterly disarmed, divested of any and all capacity to mass murder Palestinian civilians. I would go so far as to say that the people who are demanding that the Palestinians disarm while Israel, the genocide perpetrator, remains the most extensively armed state in West Asia, I think these people, quite frankly, are scum. They're just straight up scum, because basically they are insisting upon an outcome that would simply expedite Israel's extermination of the Palestinian people. It would make it easier for Israel to exterminate the Palestinian people because there would no longer be any meaningful risk of the terrorists, the Israeli terrorists who are on the ground and perpetrating this monstrosity, that they would be met with resistance, force, or retribution. And therefore, they would almost certainly be emboldened in carrying out their program of extermination. So, those of you who are out there saying the Palestinians have to disarm, you are truly loathsome human beings. Let me tell you, man, I don't give a damn who you are. At the end of the day, I remain convinced that Palestinians will not agree to disarm. And I'll point out yet again that in May of this year, a poll done by a reputable polling agency in occupied Palestine found that some 80% of Palestinians were opposed to disarmament, and something like only 11%, basically 1 in 10, favored the disarmament of the resistance. And it's precisely because there's zero chance, I would be shocked, truly shocked, if Palestinians agreed to disarm. And even if they did so at the leadership level, I don't think people at the ground level would comply with the demand. At least many of them would not. But precisely because this is so unlikely to happen, I remain rather skeptical that this latest round of negotiations is going to result in a sustainable peace. Let us hope I am wrong, my friends, but it's hard to see how that demand by the Palestinian resistance and the other elements of the Trump ultimatum that they have rejected and seek to renegotiate, how this could ultimately lead to a peace deal. Is Trump ready? Is he ready to force the hand of Israel? I don't think he's quite there yet, but I wouldn't rule it out altogether. And I'm certainly hoping, as I'm sure you are, that he has finally reached the point of frustration and exhaustion with his fellow war criminal, Benjamin Netanyahu. And if, in fact, to my great surprise, Israel and the United States do agree to respect the inalienable right of the Palestinians to resist their occupier by force, let there be no doubt that this would constitute a massive defeat for Israel. And not only for Israel, but for the entire West. I'm talking here about military defeat, because basically the Palestinian resistance has been fighting against the entirety of NATO for the past 2 years. I mean, just about every significant NATO country has been funneling weapons or military components and or economic aid to Israel as it carried out this genocide. Not to mention that many of them have been providing on-the-ground intelligence. The British, for example, have been conducting spy flights over Gaza. The Eastern Mediterranean has basically been a beehive of Western naval vessels. They've inserted, the British, the French, the Americans, their finest air defense systems into Israel and areas surrounding Israel, like Jordan, in order to protect the genocidal entity. And several Hiroshima bombs worth of explosives have been dropped upon the Gaza Strip. And if the Western-backed Israelis have to finally accede to respect the right of Palestinians to possess weapons for the purpose of resisting by force their oppression and extermination, that would indeed be a humiliating defeat for all of NATO. And sooner or later, I think that's exactly what's going to happen. The mightiest military alliance in the world just can't seem to stop losing to adversaries whose military expenditures are a fraction of those of NATO. NATO has been defeated by Ansar Allah in the Red Sea. It's been defeated by the Taliban in Afghanistan. Up until now, it's been defeated by the Islamic Republic of Iran, and it's having its ass handed to it right now, every day, in Ukraine by the Russian Federation. And even the Russian Federation has an annual military budget. Its wartime military budget is somewhere in the range of 1/10 or less of the collective military budget of NATO. Now, as if to drive home the point in no uncertain terms that the Palestinians have every intention of continuing to resist, even as these negotiations are unfolding, the resistance groups in the Gaza Strip have published video footage of various military operations carried out during the period of these negotiations And this video footage, which I'm about to share with you, has been published within the last day or so by Onandia News out of India. Have a look at this. Now, one should bear in mind that a lot of the munitions that the Palestinian fighters are using appear to be coming from unexploded munitions lying all around them that Israel has fired into the Gaza Strip over the preceding months, much of it having been manufactured in Western states and delivered to Israel during the course of the genocide. So the ultimate irony of this demand that the resistance groups disarm, which I think is doomed from the very beginning, they're just not going to do it, is that in many ways, Israel is unwittingly the largest and most important arms supplier to the resistance groups in Gaza. Now, quite apart from all of that, the Israelis just can't stop blowing each other up and shooting each other dead. A report came out within the past 24 hours that 3 Israeli terrorists were wounded, 2 seriously, in an apparent grenade accident in Gaza. The details on this one are quite slim, but looks like one of these latte-sipping baby killers didn't know how to handle a grenade. And then another report just came out this morning, even more curious, that an IDF soldier on leave, a terrorist, I should say, on leave, was killed by a border police officer who apparently accidentally shot his gun, lodging a deadly bullet in the victim. And according to the Times of Israel, the Israeli terrorist was on furlough and he was killed in his home by an apparent accidental discharge by the border policeman. The incident took place Monday night in the West Bank settlement, that would be illegal West Bank settlement, of Kiryat Arba near Hebron. The soldier was hit by a bullet fired from the gun, was critically wounded, and later died. Police said that, quote, an officer who was on vacation at home fired a bullet from his personal weapon that hit another person. So these Israeli terrorists, many of them, not only they can't handle the grenades, apparently they can't handle firearms either. They should go back to sipping their lattes at Starbucks in Tel Aviv. Now, in other news, I'd like to show you what Israel is reported to have done in the Gaza Strip during the 4 days following Trump's widely reported demand on Truth Social that Israel stop bombing Gaza. He issued that demand on October 3rd. So this was a statement that was put out today by the Palestinian Resistance on the Resistance News Network Telegram channel. They summarize what Israel has done, what it did on the 4th, 5th, and 6th. On Friday, October 4th, the day after Trump issued his demand, the Israeli Air Force conducted a devastating massacre against the Abd al-Al family in Al-Tufa neighborhood when at least 18 martyrs ascended, mostly children, including a 3-month-old infant, with approximately 20 still missing under the rubble. Additional strikes throughout the day targeted the Shati refugee camp, where 12 martyrs from the Shath family ascended in various residential areas across Gaza City. The Israeli Genocide forces continued demolishing homes with booby-trapped armored vehicles in Al Sabra neighborhood, while quadcopter drones fired intensively at civilians. That's how they've responded to the demand that they stop bombing Gaza. On the following day, October 5th, the Israeli cowardly Air Force continued strikes across Gaza City with multiple massacres targeting civilians. 8 martyrs ascended near the Labaidi junction in northern Gaza City, while another strike near the Tai junction resulted in 5 martyrs. IOF shelling targeted aid seekers at Al Shakush area northwest of Rafah, resulting in 4 martyrs among aid seekers. The IOF demolished Al Azhar University's Al Magraga branch and continued targeted demolitions using explosive-laden vehicles. How cowardly can you be? Having to send robots into residential areas to blow them to smithereens because the latte-sipping baby killers don't have the courage to confront lightly armed men in sandals. On October 6th, the Israeli genocide forces carried out sustained strikes throughout the day across Gaza City, targeting critical areas, intensive aerial bombardment, and artillery shelling. The IOF struck a school. Yes, a school, another one. I didn't know there were any left standing, actually. Sheltering displaced families at the Greek Orthodox school in Tal al-Hawa. Do you think you've heard a peep of criticism from the Greek government of Kyriakos Mitsotakis, one of the most abject vassals of Washington and Tel Aviv there is to be found on God's green earth, or even from the leadership of the Greek Orthodox Church? Nah, silence, butt kiss, nada, rien. And they go on and they say that this attack resulted in martyrs and injuries. The IOF forces also targeted civilians waiting for aid in Khan Yunis. Demolitions of residential buildings were carried out in southwest Gaza City, while the Israeli Air Force prevented aid from reaching Gaza City, or I should say the IOF. 343 martyrs ascended this week, including 39 aid seekers and 6 due to starvation. After Trump issued this demand that the satanic Netanyahu regime stop bombing Gaza, he actually thanked them for complying with the demand. I mean, we're talking here about a level of mendacity and audacity that boggles the mind. In any case, there's more news, important news to be shared coming out of Gaza. The resistance also commented on the state of Gaza's health system. So let's take a look at what they had to say there. The Palestinian Ministry of Health reported the catastrophic collapse of the health sector in Gaza after 2 years of the occupation's war of genocide. Quote, hospitals have turned into concrete structures due to direct and indirect military strikes, completely emptied of diagnostic and therapeutic care components, close quote. And of course, those humanitarian vessels that the murderous Israelis just, unlawfully boarded in the high seas, they were doing what they could to alleviate the problems, the severe, crushing problems in the devastated healthcare system of Gaza. And the statement goes on and says 25 out of 38 hospitals are out of service, and 1,701 medical staff were martyred by the Israeli genocide forces. The occupation destroyed 103 primary healthcare centers out of 157, while 54 centers operate partially. 55% of medicines and 66% of medical consumables are out of stock. Total martyrs, now we're talking here not just about medical personnel, but these are the bodies of all Palestinians whom the health ministry has been able to count and identify. That number has reached 67,173, including 20,179 children. 460 deaths were recorded due to famine and malnutrition, including 154 children. 154 children have starved to death in the Gaza Strip as Western governments continue to funnel weaponry and other forms of aid to these mass murderers. And let me just give a shout out here to the Canadian Medical Association, which has disgraced itself for all eternity by not only staying silent in the face of these crimes against the healthcare system of Gaza, but actually suppressing and persecuting those brave and noble doctors in the profession who've had the courage to speak out, like Yipeng Yi, who was a passenger on the Freedom Flotilla and whom we've interviewed here on Reason to Resist. So, what other news is there? Let us not forget the West Bank, my friends. Here is a summary statement from the resistance about the West Bank. The Wall and Settlement Resistance Commission reported that since October 7, 2023, the occupation and settlers executed over 38,000 attacks in the West Bank. The Israeli genocide forces seized 55,000 dunams of land and installed 916 military checkpoints. Settlers also established 117 new colonial outposts during this period. As I mentioned several times in this program, I was in the occupied West Bank in the spring of last year, about 8 months after the genocide began, and I toured various refugee camps with Palestinian Canadian artist Rehab Nazal, who's based in the Bethlehem area and is a university lecturer, one of the most courageous people I've ever met in my life, Rehab Nazal. And even then, it was apparent to me as a lawyer with 30 plus years of experience that the genocidal project extended to the West Bank and had already begun to be implemented in the West Bank. I can't imagine how much worse things are now, just based on reports we've seen coming out of organizations like Free Palestine TV and others who are able to report on the ground or have been at some points in the occupied West Bank. The genocide is proceeding there apace, albeit at a lower level of intensity. And it cannot be stressed enough, if Israel gets away with what it is doing in the Gaza Strip, and I certainly don't believe it will, but if I'm wrong and it does get away with it, the genocide in the West Bank will be escalated to the levels of horror we have seen in Gaza. It will then be extended to the population of East Jerusalem, the Palestinian population of East Jerusalem, and finally, it will be visited upon the citizens of Israel who are of Palestinian origin and living within the 1948 boundaries of Israel. And my prediction is that, again, I don't believe that Israel will get this far, but my prediction is that Israel will then seek to drive as many of the Israeli citizens who are Palestinian origin as possible, if not all of them, into South Lebanon and or into the south of Syria. And it's doubtful that, certainly the Syrians, the head chopper who is now the Western blessed president or leader of Syria, al-Julani, he's not going to do anything to stop that. And it's doubtful, certainly the Lebanese army is not going to do anything to stop it. And, it's not clear that the Islamic resistance in South Lebanon would have the ability to stop it. I think they do have the ability to defend their land from ground incursions, and that's precisely why Israel has not tried to occupy the whole of South Lebanon or even most of South Lebanon since the ceasefire agreement was negotiated last year with Lebanon. But does the Islamic resistance have the ability to stop the Israeli military from forcing hundreds of thousands of Palestinian citizens of Israel into South Lebanon? Probably not. Certainly, it's unclear that it does. And so that's where this would all head. This is the logical conclusion of the genocidal rampage, because after all, why would Israel stop at the borders of Gaza, exterminating Palestinians in the borders of Gaza, if the world has basically said, yeah, you can commit genocide and get away with it. We got no problem with it. Of course it'll continue. It's inevitable that it will continue. So that's exactly what's going to happen, not only to the West Bank, but to the rest of the Palestinian population in Gaza, if we allow these monsters who rule us in the West to continue supporting the genocidal entity. Now, before I conclude today's report, I want to revisit a couple of important issues that arose at the Trump-Netanyahu press conference of September 30th. And at that press conference, and in a subsequent interview that the war criminal Netanyahu gave to the Hebrew language media, Netanyahu claimed that the Trump peace plan, as they call it, which is really a surrender ultimatum, had the support of the entire Arab and Muslim world. So we were skeptical of this, and we had a member of our research team examine statements about the Trump plan, to the extent there have been any statements at all, issued by predominantly Arab and Muslim states. And I'd like to show you the results of that research, which was performed by Lena, a new member of our team. And shout out to Lena for the fine work she's been doing for Reason to Resist. And here is the chart which Lena generated at my request. Now, this, just so you understand the methodology here, because we're talking about some 52 countries. These are the countries that are the members of the Arab League and the Organization for Islamic Cooperation. Lena consulted the X account of each of these, the foreign ministry of each of these countries, and went back to September 30th, the day on which this surrender ultimatum was unveiled to the world, to see what, if anything, they had said on their X account, where typically, matters of this importance will be commented upon by the foreign ministries of countries around the world. Now, it's possible that, they made a statement. They didn't make any statement about the plan on X, but did so in another context. We have not had the time or resources to look exhaustively at all comments that have been made by representatives of these 52 governments. That would be quite an undertaking. We simply focused on the foreign ministry's statements on X, but nonetheless, this is quite instructive and revealing, I think. So Lena did not find any statement at all from the foreign ministries of Afghanistan, Albania, and Algeria. And frankly, I'd be very surprised if the foreign ministries or the governments of Afghanistan and Algeria would express support for this traitorous and treacherous surrender ultimatum. Both Afghanistan is no friend of Washington, of course, the Taliban-led government, and Algeria has been a strong supporter of the Palestinian cause for decades. Now, the statement by Azerbaijan on X was, "We welcome the announcement of the comprehensive plan to end the Gaza conflict proposed by Trump. A sustainable and just peace requires sincere commitment, mutual trust, and respect for international law." Two things about this statement. Now, Azerbaijan unquestionably is a vassal of Washington. So even Azerbaijan doesn't say explicitly that it supports all the terms of Trump's plan. He says that we welcome the announcement, the leadership of the country says we welcome the announcement of a plan to end the Gaza conflict. But that's not quite the same thing as saying we support every element in the plan. And in fact, the reference here, respect for international law, strongly suggests that Azerbaijan does not support every element of this plan, because the plan does not in any way, shape, or form guarantee the creation of a Palestinian state. The plan does not in any meaningful sense guarantee the withdrawal of Israeli troops there's no mechanism for ensuring their withdrawal, even though in principle it sees the withdrawal. The plan calls for the disarmament of the resistance, which, as I said, would be a violation of their right to resist the occupier. The plan doesn't provide any meaningful mechanism for ensuring the delivery of adequate amounts of humanitarian aid. And so also it imposes, a governance of war criminals on the Palestinian people. There's a so-called peace board led by Donald Trump, with his right-hand man being the bloodthirsty war criminal Tony Blair. That too would be a blatant disregard of Palestinian rights under international law. So, this statement by Azerbaijan, a vassal of Washington, is far from a clear endorsement of all elements of the plan. Then you have Bahrain, another very, very servile vassal of Washington. The Kingdom of Bahrain welcomed the peace plan presented by His Excellency Donald Trump regarding a ceasefire in Gaza, the release of hostages and detainees, and the flow of humanitarian aid, considering the positive initiative to achieve security and peace in the Middle East. Okay, I guess you could say calling it a positive initiative is more or less an endorsement of the terms of the plan. Now, here's Bangladesh. Bangladesh condemns the interception of the Gaba Global Shmud flotilla and calls for the release of all aid workers. And then it goes on and says, It urges Israel to end its illegal occupation of Gaza and the West Bank and cease its genocidal war. That doesn't sound to me like an endorsement of the plan. It doesn't refer to the plan, but sure as hell doesn't sound like an endorsement of it. Then you don't see anything. We didn't find anything from Benin, Brunei, Burkina Faso, Cameroon, nothing on the peace plan, but it has refused to recognize the state of Palestine in the past. So who knows where they stand? Not likely to be a very pro-Palestine position. We didn't find anything from Cote d'Ivoire, Chad, Comoros, Djibouti. And then you have the Egyptian foreign minister. He accepted Trump's peace plan, but has acknowledged that there are a lot of holes in the proposal. Don't sound like acceptance of all the terms to me. Gambia supports a two-state solution, but has not commented on the plan. Well, the fact that it supports a two-state solution, which Netanyahu has unreservedly rejected and which is not guaranteed by this plan, suggests that it's not a big fan of the plan either. We found nothing from Gabon, Guinea, Guinea-Bissau, Guyana. Indonesia supported Trump's peace plan through a joint statement with Qatar, Jordan, UAE, Pakistan, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt. And let me just say that all these countries, according to Axios, or at least some of them, were furious because with Trump and Netanyahu, because after they signed off on some version of this plan, Netanyahu, with the acquiescence of Trump, took a hatchet to it and changed in fundamental ways some of its more important terms. So it's not even clear that they truly support the plan that was ultimately unveiled to the public on September 30th. Then there's Iran. Iran welcomes any decision that would result in stopping the genocide, the withdrawal of the occupying Zionist army from Gaza, respect for the Palestinian people's right to self-determination, the entirety of humanitarian aid, and the reconstruction of Gaza, but has warned about the risks and dangerous aspects of the plan. Clearly, that's not an endorsement. Iraq has endorsed Trump's peace plan. This, I think, is a statement from the president or maybe the foreign minister. I welcome Trump's comprehensive plan to end the Gaza conflict and commend his leadership. I encourage all parties to engage constructively in dialogue and demonstrate the spirit of compromise in the interest of achieving lasting peace, security, and prosperity for the people of the region. Well, that sounds to me like Iraq, which it continues, by the way, to be occupied by the American military. I'm sure that affects how they approach public statements of this nature. They're calling here for compromise. Again, I don't see this as a clear endorsement of this plan. Jordan supports the peace plan through the joint statement I just referred to. Kazakhstan supports the peace plan. Achieving sustainable and just peace requires sincere commitment, mutual trust, and respect for international law. Well, is that really unqualified support for the peace plan? Because that would require the Americans and Israelis to respect Palestinian sovereignty, guarantee the creation of a state post haste, and respect the right of Palestinians to defend themselves from the occupier. So I don't think that's a clear endorsement of all elements of this plan. Kyrgyz, nothing. Kuwait supports the peace plan and affirmed its full support for the international efforts aimed at ending the war and achieving stability and security in the region. Kuwait, of course, one of the more obedient lapdogs of Washington in West Asia. Lebanon, I'm not sure what the Lebanese government said, but the Hezbollah Secretary General clearly is not a fan of this plan. And of course, Hezbollah represents a substantial proportion, maybe even a majority of the Israeli population in terms of its views towards Israel. Probably is a large majority when we're talking about views towards Israel are represented by Hezbollah's views. In any case, they say that this proposal is part of a scheme by Jerusalem to forge a greater Israel, and they don't support it. Libya supports the peace plan, expressed support for all international and regional efforts seeking to halt the violence. Malaysia supportive but raised concerns over loopholes. Quote, Malaysia remains resolute in supporting all genuine efforts towards achieving a just, comprehensive, and lasting peace, including the establishment of an independent and sovereign state of Palestine with East Jerusalem as its capital. Don't sound like a wholesale endorsement to me. Nothing from Maldives, Mali, Mauritania. Morocco, no statement on the peace plan, but many protests have taken place over the last week calling for the government to end their decision to normalize ties with Israel. Good on you, people of Morocco. Nothing from Mozambique, Niger, Nigeria. Oman supports the peace plan, welcomes United States efforts to end the war in Gaza. Pakistan, I welcome Trump's plan to end Israel's nearly 2-year war in Gaza. It also my firm belief that Trump is fully prepared to assist in whatever is necessary to make this extremely important and urgent understanding to become reality. said the prime minister. This would be the prime minister who was brought to power by a U.S. orchestrated coup and who supplanted the democratically elected Imran Khan, who I think we can fairly assume would be no fan of this plan. Then Qatar, of course, perhaps the biggest vassal of all, after pretty much greenlighting, I think we can fairly say at this stage that it pretty much greenlighted the Israeli attempt to murder Hamas negotiators on Qatari soil. Certainly didn't do anything to hold Israel accountable for it. Not surprising that it's on board. Not surprising the Saudis are on board. But nothing from Senegal, Sierra Leone, Somalia. The government reiterated on October 2nd that Palestine has the right to establish an independent state with Jerusalem as its capital without any displacement of its people, called for international efforts to reach a lasting solution to end the conflict based on legitimate rights of the Palestinian people. That don't sound to me like an endorsement of this travesty put forward by Trump and Netanyahu. Nothing from Sudan, Suriname, Syria, Tajikistan, or Togo. Tunisia reaffirmed their position in supporting the Palestinian people's right to reclaim all their rights and establish their independent state over the entire territory of Palestine, with Al-Quds al-Sharif as its capital. That sure ain't no endorsement of the Trump plan. Nothing from Turkmenistan. Turkey issued a joint statement on Saturday welcoming Hamas's response to Trump's peace plan and urging Israel to halt its bombardment. As I explained on the last episode of Reason to Resist, Hamas's response, carefully read, meticulously crafted response, if it's carefully read, would lead a rational objective observer to the conclusion that while Hamas accepts key parts of the plan, it rejects key elements of the plan and will require them to be amended. That's something that's become absolutely crystal clear. So when Turkey says, it welcomes Hamas's response to Trump's plan, that sounds to me like Turkey also isn't comfortable with key aspects of the plan. So Lena found nothing from Uganda, the UAE. Yes, one of the worst, most pathetic vassals of Washington in West Asia seems to be on board with this travesty. Uzbekistan, nothing. And finally, Yemen released a statement praising Hamas's positive response to the peace plan. As I said, that includes, a rejection of key elements of it, and affirms that Yemen stands firmly by all decisions and positions taken by the Palestinian resistance to confront Israeli aggression. That sure as hell is not an endorsement of Trump's plan. So this, my friends, is what Netanyahu and Trump call the support of the entire Arab and Muslim world. There is no lie that is too audacious for these two charlatans to utter. So let's move on to a big picture issue. And this is where I want to conclude my discussion about recent events in Palestine. And the big picture issue is one I've often raised, and that is the question of whether the United States controls Israel or Israel controls the United States. And I'm going to start the discussion by sharing with you a clip from the September 30th press conference of Netanyahu and Trump. And this is where the savage war criminal talked about what would happen if Hamas rejected the Trump proposal.
Rejects your plan, Mr. President, or if they supposedly accept it and then basically do everything to counter it, then Israel will finish the job by itself.
By itself. I'll let him continue.
This can be done the easy way, or it can be done the hard way.
Now, when I first heard this, and I've forced myself to listen to it several times in the course of my reporting on subsequent events, I had two reactions. The first reaction I had was revulsion. I mean, it really just sent a shudder down my spine because, I think the fairest interpretation of what he said there was that they would proceed with the extermination of the Palestinian people. Certainly, they would continue the unspeakable horrors that they've been inflicting upon the Palestinians if Hamas rejected the plan. But as my revulsion subsided, I actually, laughed out loud. And the reason why I laughed out loud, not because I find anything even remotely comical about his threats to murder Palestinians, I take those very seriously. It was because he said that if Hamas rejected the plan, that Israel would finish the job by itself. This is beyond laughable. The idea that Israel could do or has done any of this, acting independently and relying strictly upon its own resources. As I just mentioned a few minutes ago, the entirety of NATO has been backing Israel through this genocide. They've given it tens of billions of dollars worth of weaponry or lent that weaponry. They've ringed Israel with air defense systems. They've brought all of their monstrous naval vessels, or many of them, into the Eastern Mediterranean, into the Red Sea, into the Persian Gulf. They're doing spy flights over Gaza as Israel's carrying out atrocities on the ground and in the air. They are, the U.S. is vetoing resolutions at the UN Security Council imposing crushing sanctions on law enforcement officials from the International Criminal Court, who, by the way, have not taken adequate action to this very day to hold Israeli war criminals accountable. They've been tormenting the wonderful UN Special Rapporteur on the occupied Palestinian territories, Francesca Albanese, not just with relentless smears, but also with sanctions. All of the military and economic and political and legal resources of the West have been marshaled to help Israel carry out this dastardly deed. The idea that Israel has been acting by itself is a sick joke, my friends. There is no question, frankly, that if Israel were acting alone during the past 2 years, it would have ceased to exist by now, months ago, because the resistance would have annihilated Israel, which frankly is a destiny that it now deserves, thanks to its brutal savagery and its complete disregard for the most elementary principles of human decency. Now, this is, there's been a great debate about this. Most people, I'm chagrined to say, who care about the Palestinian cause, seem to believe the narrative that Israel is somehow magically, this pipsqueak zit of a country, magically is able to control not only the United States government, at least in terms of its policies in West Asia, but all Western governments. And as I've said before, the greatest, the most prolific, widely read proponent of this theory is John Mearsheimer. And I agree with much of what John Mearsheimer has to say on a host of other subjects, and I have a lot of respect for his work, his intellect. But on this issue, I disagree with him profoundly. And of course, he co-authored a seminal work about the power of the Israel lobby with Steve Walt, another proponent of this theory. And there are many, many others. And I see on social media all the time people embracing this theory, describing Western leaders as basically pawns of the Zionist lobby. Now, Mearsheimer, I should say, I heard him give another presentation of his view about this a few days ago. I can't remember what platform, and he used a formulation I had heard him use before. He said that, a powerful piece of evidence that Israel, or that the lobby controls the US government, is that the US government repeatedly does things in West Asia that Israel wants it to do, but that are contrary to our interests. That was the phrase he used, our interests. Well, the question that I ask is, whose interest exactly is he talking about? This is a critically important question. Now, if he's talking about the interests of the American people, that is absolutely true, that the US policies in West Asia, and particularly with respect to Israel, are profoundly contrary to the interests of the American people. If he's talking about the state that we call the United States, he's correct there too. If that's what he means by our interests, he means the interests of the United States, the state. Clearly, the state's interest, especially now, the way the United States has been brought into disrepute by its ongoing support for Israel, but for many other reasons, including the enormous cost of supporting this rabid attack dog. This is contrary to the interests of the states. However, and this is the key point, it is not contrary to the interests of those who actually control the levers of power in the United States and the foreign policies of the US government. Who are those people? Those people, my friends, are the military-industrial complex, the oligarchy that Eisenhower, at the end of his second term, aptly described as the military-industrial complex. And I want to talk to you about two key components of the military-industrial complex. One is the arms manufacturers. The arms manufacturers love Israel and the wars that it wages, not because they give a damn about the Jewish people, not because they care about this sordid narrative that we call Zionism, this fake sordid narrative that's now been completely discredited. No, they love Israel because Israel enables them to make gobs of money. All of this weaponry that is being shipped, all of this military aid that is being sent to Israel is used to buy American weaponry. That's the deal from these for-profit arms manufacturers. And all of these wars that Israel instigates and prolongs and exacerbates in West Asia, is increasing demand for American-made weapons. Just so that they can feel remotely safe from Israeli attack, you see the Saudis, and not only for those reasons, but for other perceived threats like Iran, they spending tens of billions of dollars annually on buying American weapons. So American weapons makers and the billionaires who own them, who control them ultimately, there's no evidence that they're motivated by some innate love of Israel to support Israel. There's plenty of evidence that they see Israel as an extraordinary source of profits for the military industrial complex, and particularly the weapons makers in the United States. And then there's the oil industry. That's another key component of the military industrial complex. They too, what are they prioritizing? They're prioritizing the maximization of their own wealth, the oligarchs who control the oil industry. And Israel effectively acts as the hammer of the American and other Western oil industry in West Asia, destroying anybody who is resistant to control over the massive fossil fuel resources of West Asia by the US government and by extension, American and other Western oil companies. They want to control those fabulously valuable oil resources to ensure that they can exploit them at the lowest possible cost and sell them at the highest possible price. This is all about making money. And that's why they too are very supportive of Israel. It's not about Zionism. It's not about the Jewish people. It's just about money. That's all it is, folks. So they view it, the military-industrial complex and its various components, it is in fact in their interests as they define their interests, namely the maximization of their own wealth and power, for the United States government to support Israel. It's not the Zionist lobby that is, driving the bus here. It is influential. It clearly has an impact, but where its impact is felt most widely is at the entry point of American politics when somebody is trying to enter into elected office. In other words, they don't have a lot of power, they don't have a lot of influence, and they're relatively vulnerable. There, the apex of the United States will, come down on anybody who has evinced sympathy for the Palestinian people like a ton of bricks, and will do everything it can using various types of smears and ad campaigns and, campaign contributions to, destroy the political career of anybody before it really takes off in the United States if they have evinced sympathy for the Palestinian people. So they are kind of like an attack dog at the gate where politicians enter into the political realm in the United States. That's where, the Israel lobby is most influential and powerful, but its influence and power pales in comparison to that of the military-industrial complex. At the end of the day, it doesn't particularly matter because the interests of the Israel lobby and those of the military-industrial complex are aligned. And so I say to you that ultimately the people who are actually driving this genocide are Western governments who are now in the thrall of the military-industrial complex. And it is the military-industrial complex that is fueling this war and that refuses for it to be brought to an end until the Israelis, at the behest of the military-industrial complex, have succeeded in destroying any and all resistance to the oligarchic hegemony in West Asia. Now, in regard to this whole issue, this important issue, and by the way, this is not a question of purely theoretical importance. If we want to solve the problem of this genocide and the broader horror unfolding in West Asia, we have to understand the cause of the problem. And the cause of the problem is that people who are psychopaths and who are obsessed with the maximization of their own wealth and power, the people who control the military-industrial complex, have effectively seized control not only of the US government, but of every other Western government, certainly the major ones, including Canada, by the way. So it's not purely theoretical. It's really a matter of extraordinary practical importance to those of us who want to bring this war to an end. But in any case, somebody for whom I have immense respect just weighed in, albeit briefly, on this very issue, and his name is Emmanuel Todd, an eminent French anthropologist. Many of you will have heard of him by now. He just issued a must-read article on Substack in which he touches upon the relationship between Israel and the United States government and other Western governments. And here you can see the title of the article. It's "The Dislocation of the West, What Threatens Us," dated October 6, 2025. I really commend this article to you. Most of it is not about Israel, at least not directly. It's about the rapid decline of the West and the extraordinarily dangerous situation that we all find ourselves in because of that disorganized decline. But I want to share with you what he had to say, Emmanuel Todd, about the relationship between Israel and the West. And I'm quoting here: "This nihilism," and he's referring here to the nihilism of Western elites, "is behind the desire of European leaders, particularly on the Protestant shores of the Baltic, to expand the war against Russia through incessant provocations. This nihilism is also behind the American destabilization of the Middle East, the ultimate expression of the rage resulting from America's defeat by Russia." Very important observation there. Those two wars are very much related. The disastrous NATO proxy war in Ukraine and the genocide in occupied Palestine and the larger genocidal project throughout West Asia, which erupted a little more than a year after Russia was provoked into invading Ukraine. And Emmanuel Todd continues, "Above all, let us not succumb to the overly simplistic conclusion that Netanyahu's regime in Israel is acting independently in the genocide in Gaza or in the attack on Iran. Zero Protestantism and zero Judaism certainly tragically combine their nihilistic effects in these outbreaks of violence. But throughout the Middle East, it is the United States, by supplying weapons and sometimes attacking directly, that is ultimately responsible for the chaos. It pushes Israel to action, just as it pushed the Ukrainians. The first Trump presidency established the US Embassy in Jerusalem, and it was Trump who first imagined Gaza transformed into a seaside resort. I am aware that it would take a book to prove this thesis. Let us hope he's going to take that project on." And he goes on and says, "A book that would dismantle the interactions between the actors one by one. But as a professional historian who has been involved in geopolitics for half a century, I feel that, like NATO Europe, Israel has ceased to be an independent state. The problem with the West is indeed the programmed death of the nation state." Weightier words were never spoken, my friends. And if I part company with Emmanuel Todd on one issue from this excerpt, it's his implication that there was a time at which Israel was a state that was independent of the West. I tend to disagree with that suggestion. I believe, as I've said many times, that from its very creation, Israel was and was intended to be and has remained a large US military base masquerading as a country. And the last thing I want to share with you today is an interesting poll that just came out from Gallup. The poll shows the trend in public trust in the United States in the mass media, basically television, newspapers, and radio, what I collectively refer to oftentimes as the corporate media. And the question that was put to Americans, this is one of many times in which they've been asked by Gallup, how much trust and confidence do you have in the mass media, such as newspapers, TV, and radio, when it comes to reporting the news fully, accurately, and fairly? A great deal, a fair amount, not very much, or none at all. And the result was a record low. A mere 21% said they had either a great deal or a fair amount, okay, a fair amount of trust in the mass media to report the news fully, accurately, and fairly. Well, my friends, that's what happens when, for 2+ years now, you whitewash a live stream genocide being carried out in full horror before the eyes of the world. This is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you from Kalamata, Greece on October 8th, 2025.